Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Creator in Conversation. I'm your host, Owen Macaulay. This is part two of our Emma Kubert episode. This episode was recorded before a live audience at the Apex. This is a 90-seat theatre located in Priory Market in Tala. So Emma was part of a Joe Kubert School visit to TASQ Art, and we invited Academy members, students, and the general public. If you had seen our previous episode with Anthony Marquis, this is something very similar. In this episode, Emma shares how she builds upon advice given and provided to editorial while creating her own comics and her own individual perspective and approach to sequential art and comic book production. It's a very engaging, awesome interview and presentation. I encourage everyone who is listening to this episode on our podcast streams to consider checking out our YouTube channel at TASQ Art, that's TASQ Art, and there you will find the accompanying video footage that goes with today's episode. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode.
So hello, I'm Emma Kubert. It's nice to see and meet you all. I'm just gonna introduce myself a bit at first, and then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna talk about more of the creative side and what a freelance comic book creator does to get the jobs from the editor that just presented. so, um, essentially, I like to start this off by saying that I actually come from a very, very unique situation in comics. I'm technically a third generation comic book artist. So I come from a lineage of comic book creators. And my grandpa, Joe Kubert, was the one to create the Joe Kubert School in America. Um, my dad, Andy Kubert, and my uncle, Adam Kubert, they both taught at the Kubert School, and they both have respective careers in this field as well with Marvel and DC. And now I'm here. and I'm here. But essentially, I teach at the Kubert School. I graduated in 2018. And for my entire life, ever since I could hold a pencil, I was interested in art. But essentially, I wasn't always, studying comic book art. I was studying just all kinds of art as I was growing up. And then, when you make that decision for your career path, you decide what way you got to go. And, if I have all of this lineage, I have to make sure that I'm going 100% down this path if I'm making that decision. So after I graduated from the Kubert School in 2018, I started working on a Teen Titans Raven graphic novel that Gabriel Piccolo drew, which Brittany mentioned. But I was a layout artist for that. And that honestly really set the tone for my career. It kind of gave me insight as to what avenue I really wanted to go in and follow, which was doing a lot of young adult stories. And that's the path that I've been going down. But to really get my start, you're literally doing anything you can, right? Like as a freelancer right in the beginning. So I was working on Teen Titans Go, DC Superhero Girls. I was doing smaller stories for Marvel, like a Squirrel Girl and X-Men stories for Marvel. But essentially, I didn't really make my splash until I did my creator-owned projects with Image Comics, which is the company that created The Walking Dead, Paper Girls, Saga, Invincible, and essentially that was Inkblot right here. Now, Inkblot actually opened another door for me, and it allowed me to understand that not only could I work on established characters that, are superheroes from DC and Marvel, but I can really create my own stories as well. I also worked on Radiant Pink for Image Comics, and I also wrote and drew Stoneheart right there. I'm just going to move this so there's not a shadow on it. There we go. But I also wrote and drew Stoneheart here, and that honestly led me to what I am working on today, which I'm working on a young adult fantasy story. That's Frank Miller's Pandora. And I'm also working on secret projects that I can't tell you about, of course. But I'm really excited about them. So hopefully, if you follow me after this, you'll see that. But essentially, what got me interested in comics early on, uh, it wasn't so much just the characters and the stories that they were telling, but it was also just essentially the creation of making a visual story, because that is essentially what you are doing as a comic creator. You are creating a visual story for someone to read and absorb and understand. It's very, very unique. I kind of call it like a combination of like film and prose novels. If you have prose novels on one end of the spectrum and film on the other, comics are pretty much in the middle of that. So having that kind of unique outlet that requires this kind of like fine art background, but also a film and storytelling background, you're combining both of those skills to make your own story. And the other thing too with comics is that you essentially have the power to just do it all yourself if you really wanted to. Now, there are a lot of ways that you can create comics. Comics are essentially a very collaborative process. When you're going through creating the comics, you have your writer, you have your artist, aka penciler, inker, color, and you have your letterer. And of course, you have your editor that oversees everything and makes sure that you get it all done. But honestly, what I think about as a freelance artist going into the comic industry, I very simply split it into two categories. It's you can work on established characters like, Supergirl, Spider-Man, DC and Marvel already have all of their characters all ready for you to go and create stories with them. But you can also go into the other category where you're, again, creating your own stories. And I would just highly recommend to do all of it. Just because it really opens up your eyes to all different ways that you can create these stories and make something out of like what you have just swimming in your head, right? So, going into those two categories, I'm going to just talk about the process of how to create comics. I know like some of you obviously know how it's done, but I think from an artist and a creator's perspective, it can be very unique and very, I don't know, just a bit more in depth of how you can take each step and literally make one of these. So, essentially, starting in the beginning, we have our writing section. We have our writers. Now, again, you can have separate people for each of these categories, but you can also do it all yourself if you want to. It's so fun to work with other creators. I work with other creators a lot of other writers and artists, but I also write myself too. So it's just having a hand in what you want to do and how you want to work. And it's all about what makes your best work out there and how you're going to display that. So when I think about writing in comics, I think Brittany answered this question where how do you break in as a comic book writer? And essentially, when I think of that, I think that comic book writers are just writers in general, just like comic book artists are also artists in general. They're drawing not just superheroes, but they're drawing, cityscapes. They're drawing like people walking. They're drawing, dogs. I don't know. I'm just thinking, but you're essentially just writing anything you can. So any kind of published work you have out there that is written is going to be your portfolio and your kind of reputation. But there's the other half of things too, is that you have the ability to meet artists and talk to them and collaborate with them to create your own stories and make a comic yourselves and present that as well. So there's a couple of different options that you can go down in that way. But when I think of writing, I think of it as always like the initial start. It's the initial idea, it's the concept, and then you're working your way from a general concept to the detailed aspect. So just like, again, Brittany said, Tom King, he wrote a paragraph for Bilquis to, essentially create concept art out of, and they were working together to just come up with the look and the feel and the aesthetic, because essentially I would say every comic book writer knows that their artist is the most, it's I hate to say this, but it's the most important part, because that's the product. You are looking at the visuals and that is what you're selling. So every writer, every good writer knows that they need to work closely with their artists to create a vision that is both of theirs, that is coming together in that way. But when you're working your way down, usually you create your script, or you are creating a pitch to these companies that you want. Essentially, it's not always DC or Marvel. I would say Image Comics, Dark Horse, Boom Studios, they're the ones that you're pitching your creator-owned comics to, and that's what you want to make sure is as succinct as possible. But the writing is what kicks everything off. And just as an example, for these two comics, Inkblot and Stoneheart, which were published by Image Comics, me and my partner, Rusty Glad, when we were creating Inkblot, we really were just going back and forth, talking about the concept of it, writing down literally on Post-it notes, just like little blurbs and little ideas that we had. And we started to get all of the art together to create the overall look for everything. Then from there, we broke it down. We're creating a script and we're getting a little more detailed. So once you have pretty much the writing pretty much all set, that's when you want to move on to the layouts and the penciling of everything. So I'm going to just open this up just so that you can see in general. So when you are going to the next aspect of writing, going from writing and going to the layouts and the penciling, this is the penciler, or this is the sequential artist that is next up, So they receive the script, and your job as a sequential artist, if you are working with a writer, if you're talking to them back and forth, your job is to create the vision and the aesthetic and the visual storytelling of everything that you see. So the way that Bilquis, created all that concept art and brought it to those interior pages is essentially what you're doing for your entire comic, as you are laying out the interiors of everything, as you are penciling through everything as well. You are developing just the overall vibe and feel of your story. And I would even say, like, they're two different stories. They're both fantasy, but they both have a very different feel to them. For Inkblot, we have it going from, basically it's like a wacky, fantasy adventure with a very cute magical black cat. But then you have Stoneheart, where you see, blood on her axe, and it's a little bit darker. But with that, I used the pencil to create a grittiness and a tone to it that matches the feel of that story. And again, as the sequential artist, you're the one setting that tone. You're the one portraying exactly what the vibe of that entire story is. And you are, taking the writer's words and pretty much showcasing them for the product that you're creating. Now, when you are a sequential artist, so I would say the three most important things that you need as a sequential artist is you need storytelling skills, visual storytelling skills, you need basic drawing skills, and you need design skills. You can work traditionally or digitally or however way you want, as long as those three aspects come together on the page, you know? And you can see it here that, again, these are all penciled and then Inkblot is inked. You can work in any medium that you want, as long as you're showcasing those three aspects of your sequential art pages. Because again, that's essentially your job, is to show the story. And you're doing that through storytelling on the film side, design and basic drawing on the fine art side. And you're just combining all of these aspects together to create that comic book. Now, when you're taking your comic book further from the layouts, from the penciling, you're going into inking and you're going into coloring. And at that point, you already have solid drawings. You already have a good direction. And that is really what the sequential artist is starting for that inker and that colorist afterwards. So if the sequential artist is setting the tone, the inker is carrying that out. The colorist is carrying that out even more so. So I always think about, if we are going into inking, because of course Inkblot has ink, we want to think about how we can get from that general penciled direction to a more solidified inked finish. And that's like what we think about comic books being, right? We think about comic books being that classic style and that classic look to everything. So we're thinking about rendering, textures, solidifying and cementing the detail of the page. And you're really supporting the sequential artist in what they want to do with their pages as well. So as an inker, you are an artist as well, and you're helping to support the process of creating that comic. And then going even further, we have the coloring aspect, which I think we've always said that coloring makes or breaks your drawing. It truly, truly does, because as artists, we can see all of the intricacies. We are obviously like looking at a page and staring at it for like hours at a time. But when someone, buys a comic book, they're seeing pretty pictures. They're looking at everything. And if those colors do not look good, that's all they're going to see. But a good colorist is able to really support everything that came before it. They're able to support the sequential art, and they're able to support the inks that the inker created. And at the very end, we have the lettering, which is essentially what you see of the writer's work, because everything else is created by the artist. The artist is taking the writer's descriptions and creating pictures out of it. So the writer's words, those word balloons, the captions that you see, those are coming directly from the writer, and it's the letter's job to create that flow with that page that supports the sequential art, that supports the inking and the coloring as well. But when you're thinking of lettering, it's also a design aspect as well. You're thinking about how you can move all around that page, and you're thinking about how you can design the writer's words to emanate what kind of story this is. Like you can see we have like sound effects down here, or I gotta move that up. Sound effects down here that support the excitement that's happening on this page. You can see how she says sweet suckleberries, that she is exasperated as she's looking at this like crazy cat being formed. So as each part of the process, as we go through it, you're really just supporting the person before you, and you're supporting the storytelling process all throughout um, the entirety of the process of creating your comic book. Now, as I said before, this is all broken up from writing to sequential penciling and layouts, ink and coloring, lettering. It can be all separate people, or it can all be you. There's no one way of creating a story like this, and there's no one way of doing it. As long as the final product looks good, then they want to sell it. So I think that kind of brings us to a point where I just want to say that, at the end of this, just think about what you want to do, what you want to showcase. Do you want to be a writer? Do you want to be an artist? Do you want to ink, color, letter? And have that be what you showcase. If you want to do it all, showcase all of it. If you want to do one aspect, just showcase that. If you're a sequential artist, show sequential pages. If you are a cover artist, create covers. And that's what I think about when I'm going through my own career. And I think if you're starting out in comics or you want to break in, that's really what you should think about too. Now I'm going to open it up to Q&A because I think I was told I have 5 minutes left. So does anyone have any questions or anything that they want to discuss? Yeah. Mm. So this is really interesting. I was actually just talking about this, that I have a lot of influences that are very different from each other. So some of the comic book influences that I go back in time a little bit, and I look at Alex Raymond and Alex Toth, Hal Foster, Milton Caniff. Nowadays, I really love Mike Mignola's work, and obviously Frank Miller's work. But thinking about that's not essentially how I always draw. I think about it more as a design sense. And I'm honestly very inspired by a lot of animation. I'm a huge fan of Glenn Keane and his daughter Claire Keane's work that I just absolutely love. So taking all of those influences that are different from each other, I try to combine them and really make it my own. Yeah. Yes. Ooh, that's a really good question. What I would say is that every project is unique. So you always want to approach each project and each story with a unique mindset where you're thinking solely about that story and how you want that to look. But essentially, you can develop your own style by just being inspired by the artists that are around you, or you can emanate other kinds of styles as well. Like, I broke into the comic industry drawing on model, which means drawing a different style than my own, with Teen Titans Go and DC Superhero Girls. And that was my ability to break in. But as an artist, you can draw any way you want. You can do anything. Not always, I would say that when you're drawing one comic book, like one periodical comic book, you want to stay consistent with your drawing. So you want to emanate the vibe of the story. But if I'm going from this comic book to this comic book, it doesn't essentially have to be the same style. You don't have to carry it out. It all depends, again, on just what you want to do with your work. Anyone else? Go ahead. Um, y- in some ways, but honestly, like when I think about working wise, a lot of the times you just want to set up your own way of working, and you want it to be like you want to produce good quality work, but you also want to be efficient because if I'm not given a deadline, I'm working on it forever, you know? so, so, like, think about it with like periodical comics and monthly comics, have a deadline, give it to yourself, have it be a month, and create a comic book in a month. If you can't do all of the different things in a month, then that means that you have to create either more efficiency, you have to go back on your process, and essentially with Stoneheart, I skipped the inking part. So that was off the list. Anyone else? Go ahead. I would say that in comics there aren't many layout artists because most sequential artists want to do their own layouts. That is part of that job. But if you're hiring an artist that isn't too familiar with doing sequential art, but they have a style that you really want, I think having a layout artist can be really, really beneficial. I know one of my favorite artists, Babs Tarr, had on Batgirl New 52, she had a layout artist that she worked with as well. And it's here and there. I would say I would if I was in charge of the industry, no, I'm kidding. But no, but I would say that it's a really beneficial thing to have a layout artist to help guide you if you don't know how to do that aspect of it. But I would say most sequential artists know how to tell a story and know how to do it right off the bat because that's the fun part. That's like the best part, you know? So I don't want anyone taking that. Anyone else? Yeah, go ahead. Mm-hmm. Mm. Like where you get pigeonholed. Yeah. Hmm. Yes, actually. When I was working on the DC Superhero Girls and Teen Titans Go, I remember I was asking like my editor on those stories, I was asking like, is there any more work for this? Like I just need something. And she like we had a good conversation about it where she was just like, Emma, I truly don't think this is what you want to do. And I think if you continue doing these stories that you're going to be known for doing this. So if you want to kind of pivot and go in a different direction, I think you should do that. And it's not her being like, I can't do those projects. It's more just like you're thinking about the current project you have and how that's also going to get you the next project. Because essentially, these two projects are the ones that got me Frank Miller's Pandora project. And that was a huge, huge deal to me. Like, that was a big deal. But I wouldn't get that project unless I had these two. So it all depends. Like, and that's why I say do what you want to do right off the bat. You can always change it down the line and you can always pivot because as a freelancer, you're working for a bunch of different companies, not just one. So you can go anywhere you please and you can just showcase, hey, like this company kind of knows me for my inks, but maybe I can showcase my pencils over here and etc. All right. I think that's it. Oh, what one more. You'll be last. No. Love it. So I have an interesting process. Again, I always say that whatever your best work looks like, work in any medium that you want. And that's what I say to the students at the Kubert School too, is like work in your best medium. So the process that I have, I really go back and forth with digital and traditional. I will create my layouts digitally, like on my iPad, and then I will print them out. I will use a light board and transfer those layouts to a nice Bristol board. And then I will pencil and ink traditionally. I will scan it in and then color digitally. So again, I go back and forth with all of this process. And if you feel like, you just want to do all digital, do it. If you want to do all traditional, do it. But you can do it any way you want. All right, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you once more for joining us for this episode of Creator in Conversation. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider liking and subscribing. And if you would like to know more about TASQ Art or to attend some of our upcoming workshops or future talks, please email us at info@tasqart, TASQART.com, info@tasqart.com. My thanks to Media Vibe for the editing and footage provided in today's episode, and of course to Podcast Dublin for the distribution and release of all of our episodes. Until next time, this has been Copyright Production of Macaulay Consultancy 2025.